People also need to be measuring the things that matter, and it's not the same things every single month. You will have things called core measures, which are always the same. They're always linked to your purpose. And then you will have transient measures. Now, transient measures come and go. Okay, so transient measures are measures that you set up which are linked to changes. They might be related to solutions you put in place, improvements, or problems. But the point is they will come and go. So if you're introducing something new in your organization, the chances are you want to monitor its effectiveness or its success or the problems that come as a result. So you will put new measures in place to do that. But transient measures are temporary. Yeah, as it says, they come and they go. It might be that you put a solution in place and you want to monitor its effectiveness. Yeah, but the core measures are always linked to your purpose. They're linked to your raison d'etre. They're measured to what you're there to do. They don't change unless what you do changes. Your core measures are always the same, and the transient measures are the ones that pop up and go again. To make sure, no, we're all good. Okay. And we also need to make sure we're getting the right mix of measures. And that's monitoring lots of different things. And we tend to lump them as input, output, process, and then the outcome and impact measures. And we'll come on to those. But input are things like how many, what is the demand spread of those? What is the profile? Anything related to the stuff that comes in as a team. So what type of work are you getting? What channels is it coming in through? Is it value demand? Is it failure demand? What demographic is using this service? They're all input measures. We've then got the output ones, which traditionally tend to be how long did it take? What was the cost? An output, people think satisfaction. Satisfaction is more of an outcome. But cost and timeliness are certainly good output measures. Process measures, I mean, there are lots. These are just some of the typical examples, but you've got things like, productivity and efficiency of your process. You've got waste within your process and value add ratio that we've talked about already. That's a process measure. We've got work in progress, so how much volume, how much is going through your process at any one time. We've got the effectiveness of your decision points. So here we make a decision, do we continue or do we stop? How many go this way, how many go that way, because that tells us something about our process. We would measure problems and errors as well. Errors shouldn't be something that's an output measure, and often you find it is. You measure the quality of something only at the end. We should be measuring quality and errors throughout the process. If it gets to the end, it's too late. We need to do it at key stages throughout the process, every stage throughout the process. We often call that yield, but those are process measures and outcome and impact measures. In fact, we're sending a campaign on this week. So if you're not signed up to our newsletters, please do. There was a link in the last email I sent you, or you can go on our website and sign up, because we are putting something out about outcome and impact measures. And that can be satisfaction and quality are good outcome measures. But they are the hardest to do, these outcome and impact measures. Have I made an impact is a difficult question to answer, but they're always linked to your purpose. And why are they difficult to measure? So they're difficult to measure because often outcome and impact are influenced by lots of other things beyond your control. But measuring them will inform hugely what you do. So to avoid measuring outcome and impact, what we find is people often measure actions. Okay, so somebody said to me the other day, well, we have our strategic objectives and then we have our action plan and we measure our action plan. If you measure your action plan, all you'll know is whether you've done the actions well or not. But if you don't measure the strategic objective, if you don't measure the impact you want to have, how will you know if those measures were the right ones? So they have to be linked to your purpose, to your why. Okay, and this is a model by Simon Sinek. Many of you might have seen Simon Sinek's work. He's written lots of books. I'm just looking at my bookshelf now above me. But he wrote a book notably called Start With Why, which I do very much recommend. It's a great read. And he calls this the golden triangle. You can clearly see it's not a triangle, the golden circle, okay, which starts with why at your center. So how do we know if we're achieving our why? And here what we find is that people measure the what and the how. They focused on the what and the how. So if I take a repairs example, because we used it earlier, so what do you do? Well, you repair things that are broken in people's homes, our customers' homes. And we can measure, how many repairs come in and how many come out and how well we do our what. How do we do that? Well, actually, we repair things that are broken in our customer's home by sending an operative round to repair the fault and or fit a replacement. So we can measure things like, this is where you can measure some of the outcome measures like satisfaction, but how many did they do on the first visit? Were there any recalls and stuff like that? We can measure the effectiveness of our how. But we have to continue to our why, to look at our impact and outcome measures. So why do we do this at all? We do this to make sure customers have a safe home that is fit for purpose. And so we need some measures that tell us whether we are doing that. Okay, it's fine to have the other measures. You do need to measure your what and how, but your what and how can change. And COVID has been very interesting for changing the how we do things. So look at this particular example. In some of the COVID times, it was very difficult to send people out for routine repairs. Emergencies, yes. Routine repairs were scrapped by a lot of housing organisations temporarily for COVID. So what they started to do was they started to have operatives and surveyors on the phone. So customers could phone in and video show them what was wrong with the repair. And if they could guide the customer through a fix themselves, then they would. If they could post them apart and walk them through it, they would. And if they couldn't, then they added them to a list to pick up later. But that changes the how. It changed the how significantly. So the measures had to change as a result. But what doesn't change is that measure of your impact, the impact you're having, the outcome you need, the why. Okay. So I've got a couple of examples here, because this leads in nicely to this point about measuring strategy. And I've tried to pick two strategic examples that we see on a lot of organisations' plans, and these might be familiar to you too. So here's a typical strategic statement. So we want to deliver a financially strong and resilient organisation. Rather than looking at what you can measure, the first step needs to be to look at how would you know if that was true? So if we fast forwarded a year, 3 years, and your board or your executive team or your trustees were asking you, did you do this? What would look and feel different? How would you know? And those are the statements that are in orange there. So when we asked this organisation, they said we'd have cashable savings, we would maximise our income, we would have an increase in funding and funding streams, we would have a good level of reserve funds, we'd have delivered our services within budgets, and we'd get value for money from our contracts. And once you've done that brainstorming, once you've asked the how would you know whether you've achieved that or not, you then develop measures linked to that how. And these are just some examples. And actually, once you've got that high level sort of organizational measure, you can then start identifying the departmental measures and team measures that contribute towards those. And there you've got then your measurement framework in place. So you can see some of those are really interesting. So you've got things like, okay, what is the value of the year-on-year income? That's the obvious one, right? If we maximized our income, has it gone up? But then we can look at the net value of new income streams. You can analyze where they're coming from. You can analyze those departments to see who's doing really well and who's not. Obviously, things like we would maintain an appropriate level of reserve funds. You measure the size of the reserve funds. Is it going up? Is it going down? Should be linked to that income. In fact, all of these are linked in one way or another. And then one that lots of organisations measure, we would deliver our services within budgets. But what you can see is it's not just one measure you're looking at. Actually, there are a number of composite measures. And so then if somebody says to you, did you achieve your objective of being a financially strong and resilient organisation? The answer you give is, well, we increased our income by X%. We've grown our reserve fund by this. We've got cashable, we cashed this much in savings this year, and this is linked to your budget, of course. We had great value for money from our contracts, and here's the number to evidence that. All these departments stayed within budget, and we actually increased the funding streams we had available to us, and therefore the funding by this. That's a good answer. Nobody's going to turn around to you and say, actually you failed to achieve your strategic objective this year. But if you say, yes, we delivered, 5 actions from our action plan, and we just have the 6th remaining, it doesn't tell you anything about the impact. And let's use another example. This one is related to transformation, which you can imagine we see a lot of in the work we do. And the measure is usually goes something like this. We need to create a fit for purpose, and modern is always in there now with more self-service and digital transformation happening. We need to create a fit for purpose modern organisation designed around customer need and demand. Okay, so that's a pretty good statement. And again, we would start by saying, well, what would look and feel different? How would you know? And in this case, we said, well, actually, customers wouldn't contact you unnecessarily. Yeah, it's because there wouldn't be that failure demand. Customers would use more self-service as their first choice rather than phoning or dropping by our offices. The cost of our service delivery would reduce because of, that self-service take-up, and because we wouldn't have those failure demand contacts coming in. Customer queries would be quickly and effectively resolved. You wouldn't have lots of queries pinging around the organisation. And we'd have satisfied residents and wider community and a flexible workforce. And that was a really good answer. And then what you need to do is you have to say, okay, how do we evidence that? And again, you build up your suite of measures. So you can see here, things like the resident and community satisfaction, that's clearly a measure in itself, how you go about doing that, whether that is with surveys or spot checks and things like that. I've seen, really interestingly, my local park has put up a load of QR codes for the litter collection and things like that. And they, if it needs reporting because the bins are overflowing and someone has to go and do it, then you can just scan the QR code and log a please come and sort this bin out, which is really interesting. And one organisation is using that, therefore, to say, we know people are more satisfied with our services if we get fewer reports of bins being collected. It's just a tiny little measure, but you can see how it adds up. You wouldn't do that in isolation, but they all add up to understanding a bigger impact. Okay, so never start with what you've got. Start with, what is our strategic objective? How would we know what would look and feel different? And then build up those measures to evidence those points. And then you've got a good way of measuring your strategy.